In this video, I'll be reviewing 4 games all themed around space. Welcome to the Stay Tuned On Gaming channel, where I talk about video games for as long as I want. And today, I'll be reviewing 4 randomly chosen games all themed around space. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below which game is your favorite. And should I do more of these videos where I review multiple games, or should I just stick to making one video on one video game? Let's get into the video.
We are close, William.
Our pale blue dot. But the Earth we know today is a withered husk, a shadow of its former self. A new beginning dawns for humanity, and it dawns today.
The first game on the list is Deliver Us the Moon, a game I had no idea what about, but after playing it, I have to say, it's kind of a hidden gem. It tells the story of Earth being drained of its natural resources and is going to die, until one day humanity finds this type of energy on the moon. They set up base, they start mining it, but one day the moon goes dark. After many years, they finally have enough resources to send one lone astronaut to the moon to figure out what has happened and to restart the power. He has to deliver us the moon. The story has a very interesting premise with no idea what happened, as just one day a blackout occurred and now you have to go figure out what it is. There's 3 stories being told here. The story of what happened in the past, the story of our lone astronaut, and on the day of what happened on the blackout. It actually interweaves really well. It's told through these scans that you can do, journals, and these hologram cutscenes that are played throughout, which are actually pretty interesting. There's not too many cutscenes, but those cutscenes are really well done. And there's a lot of characters that happen in the story. While our lone astronaut is the only main character that we have and see, there are many other characters that are in play of leading up to the events of the blackout and the other characters of what happened on the day of the blackout. It really does keep you interested, and the pacing is done really well. There's even a sort of like nice twist at the end or down the middle of the game where I was like, hey, that was actually a pretty good twist. Our main character hardly ever speaks, but you actually start to really connect with the main character, his journey, even though it's your journey, and everyone else that has gone through this journey. It's actually really well done. The writing is good and the pacing is really well done as well. Overall, it's a fantastic story that I really enjoyed. It's not too long, lasting only about 3 to 5 hours, and just overall a fantastically well done story that I really felt didn't go too deep, but what was here was fantastic. I also really liked the ending. It left a lot of questions to be asked, but just enough for you to feel satiated that you don't really need to dig any deeper. But we'll get that later. Graphics wise, the game looks great. It also runs pretty fine as well. I liked a lot of the space station. I love how you could tell that it was lived in. I like the different sections that you can clearly see, from the big meeting room to the offices to like the sleeping areas. All of that works really well. You can clearly tell that there's been a lot of people here, and then something happened and they quickly all left, or there was a plan in some areas. It really does work. The hologram sections as well, I thought they were really great as well when it comes to graphics, as you can see different areas of characters and the outline. You could really just tell so much without having any actual facial animations as well. Voice-wise, I think the cast does a really good job. A lot of the voices are really good, and music-wise, it's got a fantastic soundtrack. I really like the soundtrack. It gives this full airy impression of space and flightlessness. I just really like it. There are even moments when you go outside, like driving on the moon, and those are some of the best looking environments in the game, even though yes, the moon is just like a rock, but it really looks that good. And I think overall it's a great package when it comes to the voice, the audio, and the graphics. When it comes to gameplay, Deliver Us the Moon is pretty simple. If you've played any third-person or first-person walking around puzzle game, then this is what it is. You walk around the space station completing puzzles to explore and of course push forward the story, both your story and the story of the past. You'll find different hologram stuff or things to scan to unlock either archives, journals, or the small holographic cutscenes that might help you in the story. You also have a small robot friend companion that can help you with certain other puzzles, though to be fair, I hardly ever used the guy. Like, he was there for some puzzles, but not a lot. The puzzles themselves are not that difficult. They're nothing like, well, oh my gosh, I'm going to be stuck here for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, with most of them being pretty simple. Sometimes you gotta get a rewrite power, other times you gotta use a block to go from one room to another, and there are some secret areas that you can get access to so you can scan some new stuff. Overall, that's pretty simple. There are no enemies to speak of. You can really only die by hazards like running into like something that can burn you or running out of oxygen. Other than that, you really have nothing much to do and just explore the story while also solving puzzles along the way. Where I think the game does shine is its atmosphere. This game's atmosphere is fantastic. There are numerous points where I felt like it was turning into a big horror game. I thought an alien was gonna come right around the corner and just attack me. It's got some really good atmosphere. This, compared with the music and just some of the sound effects that you get, really gives this very eerie feeling that you're not alone, but that you are alone. It's like when you're alone in a house at night and you hear a weird noise and you're like, what the hell was that? It's just so well done. I loved everything when it came to the game's atmosphere. And the gameplay itself is fine, it's serviceable. I never ran into any like bugs or glitches, so overall, perfect package when it comes to it. Overall, Deliver Us the Moon is a really fun experience, around 5 hours long, with a really intricate premise and story, and actually really good music and audio. Graphics wise, it looks great, and the gameplay, while pretty just standard, walk around, complete a puzzle, then move on, gameplay is just serviceable. It does a good job, and again, you want to go forward with the story because it's paced really well. Like I said before in the beginning, like the game's ending does leave you with some questions. That is where its sequel comes in.
We need to bring the Ox back home to save us.
Go.
What your dad and the Lunar Council did, they left us here to rot.
We are in loss of control.
There's nothing like this on Earth.
I'm going to Outward. I'm going to find my father.
You hold the fate of everyone.
I'm gonna find another way up there now.
Something's missing. Doesn't make any sense.
Was there ever a plan to save Earth? We can be better.
Deliver Us Mars is a sequel to Deliver Us the Moon. It takes place a couple of years after the first game, and it's a much bigger and broader game. I found the second sequel to be really well done. So, the story basically takes place after the events of the first game. Earth is in a much better place, but it seems to still be on borrowed time. When you receive a distress call from Mars, you are set on a path to find the missing colonists from the first game and retrieve any technology they may have that can help Earth. But once you arrive, you find out that your mission may be more difficult than ever before. The story this time is way bigger and much broader than the first title. There's a lot of cutscenes, many characters are involved in this story, and while there were stories involved in the previous story, this time around, there's actual characters present that are dealing with a lot of the situations that happen. What's great is that if you did play the first game and you jump immediately into this game, it does feel like a proper sequel. The characters that we hear about and were talked about in the first game show up here, and you get to see how they've evolved from that moment to where they left the moon and came to Mars, and how it's affected them. You get to see so many different facets, and well, of course, how those stories are affecting the present day. There's a lot of things out here. There's also way more cutscenes. The first game barely had any cutscenes. This one, there is a lot more. They have facial animations. They have so many different story elements that was just never present in the first game. I also think what's the best thing about this game is its characters. There's not really a character that's evil. There's a lot more depth to these characters. They aren't black and white, more like real gray in the middle, right? No one is super evil, and you can see the motivation behind each character, how their own folly for making mistakes, how every decision they made was because of something that happened, or how everyone is perceived to not really be evil. Maybe it's their trauma, maybe it's their trusting, maybe it's things just aren't working out and everything falls apart. They make their decisions based on their emotions, and I just see it playing out a lot more. Our main character to this time, Kathy is probably the most interesting character, who's this kid who just sees her father in a good light, but he done something really, really bad, and no one else can really see the good in him, except for Kathy, who's trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's a fantastic sequel, and the story does some really great moments into it. It surprised me in where the story went, and it surprised me in how much times I was pretty like, wow, I clearly didn't see that coming. Graphics wise, the game is a lot better than the first time around. They have way more open areas because you're on Mars. You've got way bigger interiors than you did in the first game. It just looks a lot better. Even the spacesuits and the way your character moves just look really, really well done. But there are some instances where I think that it just doesn't really go up to par as the first game. For example, some of the facial animation and just some of the graphics overall feels just all over the place. Sometimes it looks really, really good, and then sometimes it looks like it could have been done better. Now, granted, I was playing this on a PlayStation 4, so maybe the graphics are better somewhere else. But I have to say, it's a mixed bag when it comes to graphics. I think the environments look good, the scale of the game is fantastic, the outside areas are great, but some of the facial animation and some of the things that happen in the game just aren't as great. Overall, this is a fantastic package when it comes to its story graphics. The audio is just as great as the first one, with the music being a little bit more like impactful and much more into this drive of going fast, and sometimes the quieter moments are really, really hitting really well. The voice acting also really good. And again, this time around, the voice cast is even bigger than the first one. Just overall, a fantastic product when it comes to its graphics, audio, video, and of course, the story itself. Gameplay wise, the gameplay is virtually unchanged from the first game. You still walk around solving puzzles to get from story point to story point. You can still scan stuff to get more lore. You can still find secrets here and there. And the puzzles this time around are a bit more, I would say, bigger than the first game. Like sometimes you have to go up a level, down a level. You'll also make use of your robot companion a lot more this time around. One of the biggest things with the puzzles is that you use like these nodes that can change, like push electricity into another room. Those were fine and cool, but I didn't feel like the puzzles this time around were as fun as in the first game. Sometimes it felt like they were just feeling like they drag on a lot of the times because you had to find one node that goes to another node and all that stuff. There wasn't enough change up or switch up when it came to the puzzles. But the biggest addition is climbing. Yes, climbing is the biggest addition to this game. At various points, you can find climbing spots either inside or outside, or jump from one end to the other. And you're going to use these to ascend or descend. The one thing that does feel completely different from that is that the climbing is a new thing. You can basically go from one spot to another. While it's cool, I will say that it's also not a crazy big addition. It's just there. It's very easy to climb and there really isn't too much danger. And the climbing segments that you have in here are pretty short, so there was nothing super crazy when it came to the climbing. The one thing that does feel different is the atmosphere of the game. The first game's atmosphere felt very claustrophobic, very creepy. This time around, it's kind of lost it. It's mostly due to the size of how the interior is. You also go out a lot more outside this time than you are inside of the game. The habitat is very big. Now, I don't say this is a bad thing. I'm just saying that the atmosphere just feels different. But if you like the gameplay of Deliver Us the Moon, you'll enjoy the gameplay of Deliver Us the Mars. While I don't think the puzzles are as great, everything else is virtually the same. Climbing does add a little bit of variety to the product, but it doesn't really change it up that much where I'm like, wow, they've added in a shooting mechanic into the game. But yeah, gameplay, I thought it was pretty just the same. Overall, Deliver Us Mars is a great sequel. It expands the story a lot more. It's much deeper tale, more complex characters than the first game. Its gameplay, mostly the same, hardly ever unchanged, but the climbing and character does add a little bit of variety to it. It's also much longer than the first game, coming in around 8 hours, maybe 8 to 10 hours, depending on how much you really want to explore, but it's like almost double the length from the first game, so it does really well on that end. The game does end with a little bit of a cliffhanger, which could lead to the potential of a third game, but we'll see whenever that happens. Editor note here, while I was busy doing this video, they announced Deliver Us Home, the third game in the Deliver Us series. It'll be on Kickstarter, so I'll leave a link in the description below. You can also support them on Kickstarter to get us the third game in the series. I really want to see the end of whatever story they want to tell us, because I think the previous two games were really, really good. So yeah, just go and donate to the Kickstarter if you really want to see a third game in the Deliver Us series. All right, bye.
has come to strike.
Chorus was a game that was completely unknown to me. I had no idea what I was getting into. I just saw a cool space game and said, yeah, what the hell, I'll play it. But what I found was actually a hidden gem. Chorus is a space combat game where you fly around with your ship, Forsaken, to take down an evil space cult. The story follows Nara, a top pilot who detects from the Circle and hides away. But when the Circle starts to take over more of the galaxy, Nara must stand up and fight. This means fighting and going through her past once again. But she can't do it alone. Along with the many friends she'll find along the way, she'll also need to partner up with her sentient ship Forsaken and take down the Circle once and for all and kill the Prophet. The story sounds really cool, but it isn't really the best. I feel like it takes itself way too seriously. Nara as a character, while it is great, just doesn't delve deep enough into her backstory. They don't go further into enough of how she became part of the Circle, or they don't go further enough into anything else. As for the other characters you meet, they're all fine, but pretty just one-note bland characters that are not really that memorable. Like, you be like, oh my gosh, they died. I can't believe it. I think it's really only in the first half where I felt an attachment to a character, and then after that I was like, everyone else is just kind of there. Look, the story isn't bad. It's just kind of bland overall. It does some good things, like Nara trying to fight her past and having to come to grips with her ship that she left behind, the Circle, the people she knew, but it just doesn't go enough. It just doesn't really take that one step more. I do admit I do like the quirkiness and the relationship between Forsaken and Nara, and I also like how she needs to let go of the past and work with other people. I thought all of those elements work really well, but the story overall just doesn't really work. The pacing at some points is completely off to me, and I feel like there could have been a little stuff that they could have cut out to make the story work a lot more. Graphics wise, Chorus is a beauty to look at, from the cool ship designs to the enemy to the variety in the different systems that you can visit. One where it's like very rural, lots of rocks, but then you get to one that's completely desolate and full of war-ravaging aliens. Then you get to the space hub one that has cities and it's a giant space hub. All of it looks really great. I love the environments. I love how they all look great. I love all the enemy ship designs and how the ships all look. The game just looks good, and I was just surprised at how beautiful the game looks. Even the interiors, when you're flying around in the interior with your ship, they look good as well. There's a lot going on. There's just so many beautiful things I could say about when it comes to the game's look and style. When it comes to audio, I think the voice acting around is all good. I like Nara's voice actor a lot, and at points they even have her trying to do like this internal monologue, but they're like whispering it to you. I don't know. I don't know if I like it or hate it, so it's like I'm in the middle between that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. And other times I'm like, don't really like it that much. Everyone else's voice is pretty much the same from what I heard, and when it comes to music, I love the game's main theme. I don't know, I love the game's main theme. I just think it's a really good main theme, and the other music scores that we get in the game is also really well done as well. It's pretty good as well. Overall, it's a good package when it comes to that. The story is a bit bland at certain places, and overall can be a bit of a bore, and sometimes you totally forget what the hell am I even doing? But it's also not terrible. Like, I was like kind of invested in the story and where I wanted to go, and I really did like the ending of the game. I thought the ending was actually pretty beautiful and actually good and actually strong, compared to other elements of the story. So overall, yeah, I think it's great. Chorus's gameplay will throw you into the fast-paced action of piloting a starship in a very spacefaring adventure. The game will have you flying everywhere, as that's all the game is, and it will have many dogfights that you will do, while also trying to do sneaking missions and pilot your way through interior and big exterior moments as well. The good thing is flying is pretty smooth. Use the left stick to accelerate, while the right stick will be used as your up and down, and then you have a boost to cover long distances. It feels pretty smooth, and I have no issue with it. Combat is fast, fun, and sometimes really frustrating. You have three main weapons that you can use: a machine gun, which is used on all types of enemies, lasers for shielded enemies, and rockets for armored enemies. You'll have to dodge and drift your way to defeat a variety of enemies. Now, the fighting can get a bit boring, but where the interesting stuff can come in is the different abilities or rights that you can get. You have the ability to teleport close to or behind an enemy ship, which you can use to basically, defeat them very quickly. You can use lightning abilities to defeat multiple enemies, or even turn yourself into a giant spear that can hunt and destroy a lot of them. I do like a lot of this this game's combat. I also really liked the game's enemy variety. I was surprised at just how much variety there was. I thought I was just gonna get the normal enemies, like shielded enemies, armored enemies, but no, you get a variety of enemies. Some that are fast, some that are slow, others will drop mines. You'll get ones that are giant ships that have turrets all over that you'll have to destroy from the inside, which means every dogfight is a little bit different than every other one, and you will have to constantly switch your weapons and make use of your abilities. Though I will admit I didn't really use the abilities as much as the game wanted me to. It wasn't until like the end of the game, or around the end of the game, where there was a certain enemy that could only be destroyed by one ability, where I kind of used it the most. Most of the time I hardly ever use the abilities because I kind of just forgot I had them. Your normal like machine gun and even your rockets and lasers are enough to do the job. You can also apply different modifications to your ship that will help customize your playing style. Leveling up powers and weapons are done on a mastery system, where the more you use a weapon or ability, you'll get it to level up. The modifications are cool, but you'll probably only find your 3 main that you'll use, and you'll probably never switch again, which is weird because there are a lot, and I mean a lot of modifications that work with your abilities, making your ship go faster, or even allowing you to have more shielded stuff and things like that. But the game isn't only about combat, it's just the world is also a big place to explore. Every solar system has a lot of stuff for you to find and are vast, and everyone is a bit different than the others. I was surprised at the elements that this game has from many other open world games. You have secrets, random events, random enemy fights, big areas that are just out in the world that you can find. At any point you can use the sense system, the sensory system that you have to find just floating money around. I just found it very cool. I thought I never would see like this open world space game that you could fly around and just shoot people at certain points, or do side missions, or have random events. It was actually pretty cool. Now, it's not all perfect. I think flying interior places can kind of suck. Some of them were pretty like tough to really fly around. I think fighting can be a bit frustrating because you can get very disorientated at some places, like you don't know what's left or right or up or down, so you're just flying at like crazy like mad points. It's also very hard to stop the ship at certain points, and you'll be flying into rocks and flying into a variety of different things. And the bosses are also pretty boring. Like, there are a couple of bosses that you have in the game, they're all really boring and pretty easy to defeat until like the final boss, where it can get really crazy. The gameplay is fine. There are some issues here and there, but I did find myself never really being bored of the gameplay. I wanted to find the rights. I wanted to like the interior stuff. I liked a lot of the dogfights, and again, you do a lot of them. I thought they were really fun and different. And again, the enemy variety really brings the combat up a lot more, because I would have felt that if we just had like a standard 5 different enemies, I probably would have hated the combat a lot more. Overall, it's great when it comes to the gameplay. Overall, Chorus was a welcome surprise and a hidden gem in my opinion. There was a lot I liked about it. There was many things I thought the game did really well, and many of the gameplay elements and even some story elements did surprise me. While I don't think the story is that great, I do think the ending is very good and it really is pretty impactful. The gameplay is fast fun but can be frustrating at points, but there's nothing here that turns me off the game completely, and I would highly recommend Chorus to anyone that's just looking for a game where you can fly around in space and shoot people with an interesting premise. That is what Chorus is, and I think that's all it needs to be.
You want to be alone. You know, it was 20 years ago today. While I write, I can't stop thinking. They were dancing. Just wanted you two to have all the love in the world and beyond. Carl, I know you don't want to, but you must hear this. Look around you, Carl, and please look after yourself. I hope you'll come back one day. I mean, really come back. How far is far enough?
I put Still there on the list because it was a game I just saw it was about space and I put it on the list. But I didn't expect to get a game that had a very deep and impactful story. It tells the tale of Carl, a person who is stationed himself at the Bento space station lighthouse in complete isolation. While he deals with his trauma and does his routine maintenance checks, he sometimes speaks to his AI companion Gorky and may play chess, mostly always losing. But one day during his routine checks, a strange radio message comes across him. and that message will upend his routine forever. What you get is a really great tale about grief, about loss, about acceptance, and even confronting those things that you run from. It's really, really well done. I couldn't believe how well written this story was. This is not only the deep emotional side, but even some of the lighter moments. Carl feels like a person who's just been through a lot of stuff. He's been through this shitter, and he thought coming here would help him deal with a lot. Instead, it just makes him feel much more lost than before. And Gorky, the AI companion, is really good too, as he provides a lot of the light-hearted moments and some of the funnier moments as well. As you progress through the story and complete different puzzles, it becomes even more adamant that this radio message is throwing everything for a loop. This has Carl meeting a whole bunch of people before eventually certain truths are revealed. I'm not going to say what those truths are. I do think the story does have a little bit of a nice, shocking reveal, but I also sometimes feel that around that point, the story kind of loses it for me, where I felt it was kind of dragged on and they try to bring some really cool space stuff into it, when I felt like the more human side of the story is way more interesting than some of the sci-fi elements they add in. Overall, it's a pretty fun game. It's a pretty fun story. I think it's pretty deep and emotional. And when you come out of it, you might be thinking, damn, that was actually really, really well done. I can't say so much about the gameplay. Graphics wise, Still There does this very cool 2D comic graphics, and I really, really like it. I love the lighthouse. It feels lived in. There's so much character to it. You get to see all these different things of him marking how many days he's been there, to the iguana that he has, to all the various things that are lying around in his bedroom, to just the things that Carl will comment on as you click on them. The graphics are fantastic. Again, they're very nicely done. I love the colors in the game. They add just so much, like this purple hue that the game has, just again adds a lot of color to it. And the color is really needed in this game because otherwise it would look pretty boring no matter how much cool graphics there are. As for audio, there is no voice acting to speak of, not anything like that, so you're mostly just left with the music, and it's great. I love a lot of the tracks in this game. Very serene, subtle stuff, especially when you're dealing with a lot of the heavier moments in the story. I think it just plays off on what happens. There are also some really cool action tracks that you get in here for the more intense moments. I think they play out very well. So graphics wise, they look good. No voice acting to speak of, but I also really did like the music of the game. When it comes to gameplay, Still There is your traditional point and click adventure game, though much more on the point and click than the adventure game, as Carl is stuck in this lighthouse and he really only has a couple of areas that he can explore. His bed, his bedroom, the kitchen, the actual console, and of course the space area where he can walk out and stuff. The main role of the game is completing all the puzzles to further on the story. There are a couple of other side stuff like doing the daily missions and routines, and of course eating, making Carl eat or even go to the bathroom. This game has no hand holding, like nothing. They tell you really almost nothing from the very start, with you having to figure out everything, which means clicking on a lot of different stuff to get things working. Once you finally understand what you got to do with the routine missions, this is where the game's difficulty goes up, and this is where the puzzles can become really, really annoying. Like I said, there's no hand holding, and while you can ask Gorky to give you a little bit of a hint on of exactly what I must do, it can also sometimes be very obscure on exactly how do I get this puzzle done. There are many different puzzles, some that will have you trying to figure out which star works with what, some that will need you pointing out the cassette to put in another power, or this has to link with that. It can get pretty damn difficult. I have to admit, I got stumped a lot on a lot of puzzles, and this really did make my experience a little bit frustrating. Maybe I'm not smart enough to understand all of the puzzles, but some of them just seemed completely ridiculous in what I had to do, like trying to get the power system, or probably that stupid little light puzzle that I had to do that annoyed the hell out of me. I think I spent like 40 minutes on that. There really isn't nothing else to talk about the gameplay. It's just the standard point and click. puzzle game that you gotta do to figure out. So overall, gameplay is fine. The puzzles are okay, but they are difficult as hell. And it can really make the experience from Still There with this really great story really bring it down a lot, because I can be really frustrated trying to figure out what this puzzle wants me to do. Make sure you click on everything, take a lot of notes, and keep that manual ready if you want to go through this game at a leisurely pace. Still There is an old school point and click adventure. It tells a really deep and fascinating tale that I really love. The graphics are okay and they look fantastic, and I love a lot about the music. But at the same time, while it is a fantastic old school point and click adventure, it's also got the same frustrations and difficulty that those games have. There's no hand holding. You'll be struggling for a long while with a lot of these puzzles that require a lot of information that you gotta put down. Starting off simple and then eventually moving into the much more frustrating parts, with you being stuck on it for about 40 minutes at best, maybe even longer than that. This game isn't long. It could last you 3 hours, maybe even shorter than that, but it could also last you maybe 5 hours, as there is a lot of the times you just being confused at what the puzzle is. Look, if you can get it for a good price, it's a fun time. And there you go, 4 games all themed around space, all reviewed. Which ones were your favorite? Which one do you want to get into? Which ones have you played? Personally, I really liked Deliver Us Mars. I think it was the best out of all the games I've played, and it really pushed the boundary of a sequel and what it can do. I also really liked Chorus. I thought that was a fantastic surprise, a gem of a game that I think some more people should pick up. A lot of craziness, a lot of action in that game. I really did enjoy my time with both of those games. Still There was fine, but I got frustrated a lot of the puzzles, but it's old school point and click. And Deliver Us the Moon wasn't bad, it's just I felt like Deliver Us to Mars was the much better game. Granted, you gotta play Moon, then play Mars. Overall, thank you so much for watching the video. If you like it, please comment down below, give a like to the video, and subscribe to the channel. And thank you for 400 subscribers. I never thought I'd get you. So I'll see you guys in the next video.